Hi everyone, we're back for video 3 in our series for EMP prepping and surviving. If you haven't seen the first two videos, please watch them first. They are named in order, video 1 and video 2. This is video 3. So please watch those first. We've watched in the first one what an EMP is, how it affects our infrastructure, particularly our electrical grid, and what that does to society in essence. In video number 2, I walked you through the scenario, what would happen that day in your particular case. I asked you to think about it and place yourself in that situation so that you can start to understand how difficult things will be without all of the typical tools that we're used to depending on. No transportation, no communications, etc. So in this video number 3, we start to talk about what to do to survive it, and I've broken it out into 2 videos. Video 1 is how to prepare now for that day, the end of the world as we know it day, and video number 4 will be what to do the day of. This video will likely be a little bit longer because there's a lot of information in here, because this is really the meat of where you are now. You now know what an EMP is and what it'll do, and this now will start to walk you through what you can do to prepare for that day. What is the goal? You need to decide what the goal is for your family. In most cases, I think the goal will be simply for the family members all to get back home safely. It could be something different for you. You need to figure that out. But I think for most people, it likely will be to get back home safely. If they don't know that an EMP has occurred and you haven't told them anything, they're going to be sitting around waiting for something to be done. That is the default behavior of everyone in modern society. If you go back to 9/11 when the towers came down, their instructions were to stay in the building. The second building had a lot more people in it because they had been told to go back to their offices and wait. And nobody would think or thought about the worst case scenario. They didn't prepare for the worst case scenario. They prepared for obvious problems, fires and things of that nature, but they weren't prepared for planes hitting the buildings. They should have planned for the worst case scenario. And in fact, in one of those companies, there was a security guard who took his job very seriously. Excuse me. And he was in charge of about 400 or 500 people, their security, and he didn't just stop at what the rest of the companies and the building security were recommending, which is to stay in the building. He said in his research and preparedness for it, he thought that they were targets. He was around when the first attack on the towers happened in the early 90s. He was there for that, and he knew that that wasn't going to be the last time that the towers would be targeted. So he prepared for the worst. So for his people, he had already instructed them that if in the case of an emergency like this, they were to leave the building. And when that attack happened on the first building, the people in that second building that were under his charge left the building and survived. They lived because they prepared for the worst. This is what we're doing. We're preparing for the worst. So we're going to cover that in here. In your case, like I said, your family likely will need to get back home, at least where you're together and can help each other. You need to walk through this scenario for each member of your family because they will be in different places. First and foremost, you need to teach them how to recognize the difference between them. A regular EMP outage and a regular power outage and an EMP. It's very simple. If there's an outage of electricity and your phone is still working and your car is still working and there's cars moving around on the streets, that's a regular power outage. If nothing works, cars don't start, phones don't work, that's an EMP attack. everyone in your family should know that. And everybody should know that when that happens, now they need to implement this plan that you are working out. You need to work through each one of those people who are old enough to be able to carry out instructions like teenagers and tell them this is what you need to look for and this is what you need to do when it happens. You need to emphasize to them that in the case of an EMP, when they know it's an EMP, they are not supposed to sit there, and they should not. I'm talking about, this is a personal decision you need to make. But if their teacher is telling them, no, you sit here at the school while the hours pass and things get worse, I would recommend that they say, I'm sorry, but my parents have told me that when this happens, I'm to go home. And they need to leave. For the younger ones, you need to figure out how you're going to get them home. In most cases, most of the schools for your elementary kids will likely be close to home. So once you get back in that area, I guess the job would be for you to get them out of there and take them home. All right, we're going to continue now to focus on security, communications, and transportation. There are a lot of other things that you can do to prep. In fact, if you're part of the general prepper movement, you know that food and water and a lot of other things are typically talked about. Yes, all of those things are important, but we're talking about the moment that happens, an EMP attack occurs. You need to focus on these three things in that order: security, communications, and transportation. You need to do it in that order because security is first, because if you are dead, the other items don't matter. So security is first. That should be for you, your spouse, your old enough kids that are going to walk home. They need to be aware of security, and you need to plan for what you need to do. Communications is next because it's likely that you will not be with your loved ones. And if you can't communicate with your loved ones and they're in a bind, you can't tell them what to do. You can't organize, you can't plan, you can't coordinate, you can't direct, and you can't prioritize. So you need communications if possible. Now, in the scenario where an EMP occurs, it might be sufficient to just tell your teenage kid, hey, you leave, you go home. There's no additional communication necessary in that situation. But I would still recommend that communications be on your list. And we're going to cover what kinds of communications can survive an EMP so you can have the ability to communicate. Transportation is number 3, and it's critical. If you do not have transportation, you're stuck in whatever situation you might be in. It might be less than ideal area of town, and you might have no way to get back to your loved ones. For example, as I mentioned before, I work 35 miles away from home. How am I going to get back through 35 miles of people basically freaking out? That's my challenge. I'm going to talk about transportation later on as well, as far as what can survive an EMP, because there are vehicles that will survive an EMP. So that's coming up. Plan to prepare. You need to have a bug out plan. A bug out plan, if you're bugging out, if you're leaving your home, once you get home and you have a plan to leave, there's a lot of things that you need to consider. And all those things should be notated and listed and printed out on paper and carried on you, because you cannot depend on your phone or your computer or anything else. And there's, in my plan, there's probably a couple, 2-3 dozen items that I've listed. And these are things that are simply, you're not going to be able to remember. You're going to be in a stressed out situation to begin with. And for you to rely on your memory at that time is not a smart idea. So you need to print it out, plan it out, print it out, and carry it on you. You need to review your family's situational awareness. And these are techniques and skills that you can teach to your loved ones so that they are better prepared for that moment. When this happens, the old way of society is out the door. It might not be immediately. It might not happen immediately, but it's going to happen as hours and hours go by and more people become aware that this is not just a regular power outage. And now they're freaking out about their kids and their family and where they are. Things are going to get rough really quick. So you need to teach your family about situational awareness, which I have some links here that will kind of at least give you the basics. You need to also learn about the OODA loop. and that's also covered in a link further down, and I'll bring that up in a minute. Again, it's techniques about dealing with stressful situations and dangerous situations and how to respond to them properly. So you need to work on security, communications, and transportation until you have all the skills and all the equipment you need to accomplish your goal. Your goal, in our example, for example, is to get back home. Well, what do you need to do that? That's what you need to determine and identify. You need to identify also your weaknesses in each one of those categories and address them. Literally, as you walk through the exercise that we had in video number 2, which is to place yourself in that situation and walk through and try to figure and think ahead, what will it be like? What will I face? You're going to identify your weaknesses. What are you lacking? What in knowledge and tools to survive and accomplish a goal? As you come across each one of those weaknesses, you need to note them down, and then you need to do whatever is necessary to fix those. And that's part of what we're covering here. All right, item number 1 in our list of 3 things to worry about is security. Now, there's a lot of people who I know have problems with firearms. They are afraid of them. They fear them, and they believe that they're dangerous, and they are. But in a situation like this, where society's norms will break down quickly, you need to be able to protect yourself. And if you think that you won't need to worry about that, then you are putting your safety and your family's safety and welfare in the hands of others. And that is not a good idea. It is your responsibility to protect yourself and your responsibility to protect your family, not others. You cannot rely on the police department when they're not around. And in this situation, they will not be around. And the more people become aware that the police cannot come, there's a small percentage of people who will take advantage of that situation. And if you're relying on their intentioned behavior, then you're betting on the wrong side of things. So under security, you need to get your license to carry. In Texas, it's known as your license to carry. It's concealed carry, or you can now open carry as well. I would strongly recommend that you get your LTC, that you get training, proper training for it. It's not enough to get the license. I have a license to carry, and it's easy to get the license to carry. It doesn't take a lot. You sit through one class, you do some question and answers, and you do a short little test, and then they take you out and they give you, you take your firearm out and they give you a target that's not even very far away from you, and they let you shoot 50 rounds at it. And if you basically hit the target anywhere on it, that qualifies you. That's not enough. Because firearms are dangerous, you need to learn how to properly and safely deal with a firearm. It's not something to be taken lightly. So you do need proper training. I strongly recommend that if you do this, get proper training. There are courses out there, and go out to the range on a regular basis and practice. Practice makes perfect. Take additional armed personal security classes, self-defense type classes. I would also recommend that you do that. Now the last 2, practice situational awareness and the OODA loop. Situational awareness, I have the link here in the video, and I'm going to put them in the notes as well, but I have the link to a website. There's tons of them out there. Just Google situational awareness. But this is one, how to develop situational awareness of Jason Bourne from the Bourne movies. It basically gives you a lot of information about what it is, how it works. It ties into the OODA loop, which I'm going to talk about briefly here again. But there are basically, this was all developed by, and mentioned in here, an Air Force fighter pilot, John Boyd. And there's links all through this document that will cover that. Jeff Cooper, in a book called Principles of Personal Defense, came out with the color-coded system to help you gauge your mindset. And there are 6 colors listed. White, your heart rate is normal. This is the condition that just about everybody walks around in. They're completely oblivious to everything around them as far as security is concerned. They're not aware of what's going on. I have seen videos online of people who are at a counter at a store buying something, and they're literally going through their purse or their wallet, and a guy will walk up next to them with a gun pointing at the guy behind the register, and the person is still not aware that there's a gun standing right next to him, a guy with a gun next to him. That is lack of situational awareness, and it's dangerous. So condition white is where just about everyone is. You need to be in condition yellow. Your heart rate remains calm. You're not stressed out, but you're taking in everything that's going on around you. This requires effort. And this is why it's important on a daily basis as you go through life to always practice this situational awareness. It means looking around you, looking for things that are odd, for people who are behaving odd, people who are behaving out of the norm, who are acting strange. You get a gut feeling about them not being right, quote unquote. You already have a head start of them if you have that knowledge. If you're aware of somebody walking into the store you're in and they're not acting normal, you need to be aware. If you watch videos online about this information, you'll see videos that are mind-blowing because people are so not aware of what's going on around them that they let danger literally walk up to them. And you cannot, in an EMP situation, you're trying to get home, you cannot be the person who allows people to walk up to them. Because if they are within reach of you, you have already opened yourself up. Condition orange, your heart rate is elevated. You've identified a danger or a concern, a person who is potentially a danger because of the way they're behaving or what they're carrying or the way they're looking at people or talking to people. You've seen them before. You've probably seen them on TV. They act loud. They start screaming. They start becoming aggressive. That's where you are at that point because you've identified something and you are now becoming concerned. But you're still completely capable of reacting. But at this point, you can now start to react to the danger. Do you leave? Do you get away from that person? If they're not a danger to you, yes, you get away from them and you get your family and friends or whoever out of the way of that person. You contact 911 if in the situation, current situation where we have police. That's when you deal with that. In an EMP situation, you avoid those people. There's nobody to call for help, so you just simply get away from them. Condition red. Now you're in a stress situation, and you potentially are dealing with the actual threat to you. And this is where you start to, adrenaline starts to go through the roof, and you start to potentially have to fight back. Condition gray, now your elevated heart rate is at 145 to 175, and your body starts to have problems. You might not react properly, and this is a danger. So you don't want to get above condition red. And the way to avoid going above condition red is to deal with the threat. But condition gray is a problem, and by the time you get to condition black, basically you're collapsed and you're not responding. So anyway, this is part of the situational awareness. I'll put the link in the video, and you can get to it and read more about it. The OODA loop is related to that, and the OODA loop is also has a lot of information about this, and particularly, I believe there's a section. It's this loop here, observe. So you observe something, you orient yourself, so you figure out what the context of what you're observing is. That gives you information about what you should do next, and then you act. This is the OODA loop. Whoever does this in a confrontation first survives and gets the upper hand. So there's a lot of information in here about this, and you should read it and learn about it and practice it. So there's just too much information in here. I'll let you go through it on your own, but be aware that that's something else you need to learn about. Action items. At the first sign of what will be a long-term collapse, when you first identify an EMP attack has occurred or a sun burst has occurred and an EMP effect is in place, you need to do a couple of things. You need to get out all the cash you have available in a bank, if it's still available, if you're within your bank distance-wise and you can get to it, get your money out, get it in cash, get it out. Now, a lot of banks are probably locked down because electricity's out, but some might stay open and allow paper transactions, and you might be able to get your money. At this point, all members that have a license should carry it 24/7, and including extra clips of ammo. You should place, if you're home, shotguns for home security. I do recommend at least having a shotgun or more. And common areas of your home, you should open the door to no one. Once you make it home, you do not open the door, period. It doesn't matter what's going on outside, who's trying to tell you to open the door, you do not open it. There are people who use this technique of letting a woman go to the door and scream and ask for help. And you peep through your peephole and you see a woman and you think, oh, well, it's a lady, I'll let her in. And you'll open the door at least, and behind them or off to the side is a guy or two who will then run through and knock you down the minute the door is open. So be aware that you do not open the door to anyone. If you haven't yet done, you buy as much gas in gas cans and store it away. Store it in a home until you can get out, or if you have a bug out location, you can get out to your bug out location. That time, then you move that fuel to the truck or vehicle. You got to store your rice and beans, basics of food, oil, ramen, cheap and light, and all it requires is water, spices, and salt. And I have more information on that in the food section in a minute. We have 2 to 3 week window before a complete collapse. It might even be sooner than that, where everything just will go down and collapse. Be aware martial law might be closing some travel routes. If you're in an early scenario, you might encounter these and trying to get out. If you're bugging out, you might come across them. There's some things you can do with that I'll cover maybe in another video. You can join those you trust or who can assist you to survive. You should definitely have a network of people that you can trust and work with. And then sometimes you have to consider that if you have other family or children who don't live with you, they might not be in a mindset to consider any of this, and they might not move to come closer to you or live with you in order to survive. So be prepared for that. Emergency services, you need to basically plan that they're not going to be available. Police is not going to be available. You can't get to them, they can't get to you, you can't call them, and so forth. So you need to arm yourself and your family. You need to keep your hands for close and intermediate self-defense and rifles for long-distance defense. You need to get your license to carry, as I mentioned before. If you try to get the same caliber handguns so that the ammo that you buy will apply to all the handguns you have. Don't get multiple different calibers, and now you got to get different caliber ammo for each. I prefer the Glock for some simple reasons. They're dependable. They are very dependable. They are easy to fire, and they're very easy to clean. It breaks down into 4 simple parts, and you can very easily clean. Anybody can clean a Glock once you show them how to break it apart. In comparison to, say, a 45 caliber 1911 firearm that breaks into dozens of parts, and you got to know how to put those all back together. Keep it simple. The Glock is dependable and easy to clean, as I mentioned. So I recommend Glock for people who are just starting out with firearms. I use 9mm. There's, you could argue about calibers for the rest of your life, but I prefer Glock 9mm simply because there are more rounds in a clip, 16 rounds per clip. And the bottom line is half the people are going to run off the minute you fire, in just period, fire. They're going to run. The rest that don't run are the ones you need to worry about. And if they come at you, you need to be able to defend yourself. And that bottom line means you shoot them or you're going to die. And if you're dead, your family is now in trouble. So you need to, we'll have to get into the firearms thing. There's a whole lot of information on that. For those that want to do this seriously, we'll do some meetups and maybe videos for that as well down the line, and go to the shooting range. But I cannot emphasize enough that you need to get proper training. Don't just go out there and buy a gun and think that you're set. There's plenty of videos out there as well of people who shoot themselves or shoot other people by mistake because they do not know how to treat a firearm with respect, the respect that it deserves. So a firearm is nothing more than a tool, but just like any other tool, you need to respect it. Fire department. You will not have access to a fire department, so you need to protect your home from fire. That means you have to have fire extinguishers at home, and in your EMP vehicle as well. So carry those and have them available. EMS, your emergency services, your first aid in essence is not going to be available either. So that means now you need to take care of first aid yourself. That means you need to get certified in first aid and learn as much as you can about treating both illnesses and wounds. Gather first aid kits, get everything you need. There's a whole section I have on that too about what you can buy and what you can find for your first aid kits. Prescriptions. Without medical attention, without medicine, any injury can get infected and lead to your blood poisoning and in essence death. So antibiotics are important. Now the problem is, of course, is you need prescription to get antibiotics. As many in the prepper community know and in survivalism know, antibiotics can be purchased that are used for fish, like amoxicillin and ampicillin. They're used for fish, and it's the exact same thing that we buy over the counter, except you can buy it without a prescription. You can research that, and I can give you other information when we get into other meetups and other videos. But be aware that you can get antibiotics legally. They're sold to be used for your fish, but you can actually use them for yourself. Communications. We talked about the fact that there's no more phones and no landlines, nothing. How do you communicate? Well, communication, electronic equipment can be protected from an EMP in what's called a Faraday cage. It is basically a cage or a container made out of metal in which you can place your electronic devices in, and they can then survive an EMP. There's a lot of information that says no, they will not, and a lot of information that says they will. The problem is, do you want to risk it? That it will not work? To me, if there's any chance that a Faraday cage will protect some of my equipment, I'm going to take that chance and put it in there. What do you have to lose? They're simple to make and they don't cost much to make, so research that. We'll talk about that as well in other meetings. Be aware that everything you place in the Faraday cage, phones, whatever you put in there, will not be available for you to use. The whole point of it is for it to be in that Faraday cage, and you cannot then take it out and use it. You need to keep small solar or battery powered radios. The reason for this is that there are some federal stations that are protected against EMP, and they will have generators and they will be operational at least for some period of time. So radios will be useful at least for some time. But if your radio is dead because of the EMP, then you can't hear what they're saying. So if you protect your EMP or your radio inside of a Faraday cage, after the event you might be able to use it to at least find out what's on the airwaves. Satellite cell phones. Regular cell phones would be dead unless they're in an EMP hardened Faraday cage. But satellite cell phone, but even if your cell phone survives, it won't matter. Everything else is down, so you're not gonna be able to talk to anybody on the cell phone. You might be able to use the other information that's on the cell phone, but you might not be able to make cell phone calls. But satellite cell phones are different. Satellite cell phones do not use cell towers. They work through a satellite. So if you have a satellite phone and it survives an EMP attack, that satellite phone will still be able to connect to the satellite up above, which is likely to survive, and then from there bounce to the other satellite phone that, say, your kid has or your spouse has. So you could have satellite communications after an EMP attack, and now you have a way to talk to each other and make plans and carry them out. Ham radios. If you are familiar with ham radios, or not familiar with ham radios, they are basically old versions of communications, walkie-talkies, big versions of walkie-talkies that you could use to talk to each other across the building. A ham radio allows you to talk to somebody miles away, in some cases hundreds of miles away, but you need a license to operate a radio. It is easy to get the license. It only takes 1 day of going through a class, and then you take the test, and then you get your license, and now you have a license to talk. Now, after an EMP attack, is anybody going to be checking whether you have a license? Probably not. So you keep that in mind too. But the bottom line is you still need the equipment, and in order to that, you got to research. I would recommend, though, that you get, or at least look into getting older models of ham radios, like those that have vacuum tubes. Vacuum tubes have been proven to survive EMP attacks. There was an EMP attack, or not attack, an event that happened in, I want to say it's 1964 or somewhere in there, in the early 60s. A test was run out in the Pacific Ocean by the U.S., where they set off a nuclear a weapon in the atmosphere up above, the way it would be done in an EMP attack. And they were 800 and some odd miles away from Hawaii. And in Hawaii, it blew out street lights and it blew out other gear. So 800 miles away, it affected Hawaii. So, but one of the things that we learned from that and other experiences previously is that vacuum tubes will survive. So there are Heathkit and other brand gear, ham gear, that will survive. I have a link there to this article that talks about EMP hardened ham radio communications. It talks about what they are. Now, I will warn you, this is technical. So if you don't know anything about ham radio, this is going to be all over your, going to go right over your head. So you need to learn about that if that's something you want to look into. But be aware that it's pretty high-end stuff. Electrical power infrastructure. There's nothing you can do about the grid other than pressure your congressman to pay attention to its vulnerabilities. Otherwise, gather the knowledge and skills and tools to live off grid. So the electrical grid is gone, so you need to figure out how to survive. Transportation. We've covered security, we've covered communications, now we're talking about transportation. EMP survivable vehicles. Look into vehicles that have a better chance of surviving an EMP. Any pre-80s vehicle should be okay. Any car that was made in the 70s or 60s, or even earlier, should be fine. It will start, it will work, it will run. Now, your only problem is fuel. But if you have an old vehicle and you have fuel in the vehicle and you are 50 miles away from your home and an EMP attack occurs, you're going to be able to walk out, get in your vehicle, start it up, and drive home. Any vehicles from pre-90s, in the 80s in other words, they might be okay. There might be an item or two on them that might not survive, but you can purchase extra backups for those one or two electronic items and put them in a Faraday cage in the back of your vehicle, and if an EMP attack, that can be swapped out in less than half an hour and you're on the road again. But that's a toss-up. Pre-80s is pretty much guaranteed that the vehicle will run. There is no computer chips in it. There's very little that can be damaged. Also, those older vehicles are easier to repair. If you have parts available, you can repair it. If you all know that are older, my age, old vehicles, you'd be able to get in there, climb in, and do all kinds of stuff. Try that with your modern vehicle. Get in there and see if you can even figure out where anything is. It's all computerized. If you can get a diesel vehicle, it is preferable because diesel vehicles will run on a variety of fuels. I've seen information and videos out there where vehicles are run on cooking oil, literally cooking oil. Now, if you're on a trip to bug out and you come across an old restaurant that's been deserted, you could go into it and find cooking oil and put it into your diesel vehicle and it'll start up and now you have fuel again. So that's why diesel is preferred. It is also easier to store. Diesel is much more stable than gas. You can spill diesel on the floor, throw a match into it, and the match will go out. Whereas with gas, even the fumes will light. So diesel is much safer to use. You should also consider getting larger or dual tanks in your vehicle and carry extra fuel cans. You need to be aware of nuclear reactors in your area. If you're bugging out, if you're leaving your home, you need to travel with those locations in mind, where those nuclear plants are, and take into consideration the direction of the wind in relation to your path and the nuclear plants themselves. If the worst happens, we're going to have meltdowns in our nuclear plants. And that means radiation fallout across wherever the wind carries it. Gas stations will be unable to pump without electricity. What does that mean? If you're bugging out and you got your vehicle and you're traveling across and you have a gas vehicle, there's going to be cars everywhere. If you have a hose, a garden hose, and you come up across a stranded vehicle, you can siphon the fuel out of that vehicle and put it in yours. So there's going to be fuel everywhere, but your vehicle has to be able to take advantage of it. Banking and finance, keep cash on you. You need to have money on you, cash. We hardly ever do this anymore, but you need to make a habit of having cash on you for this event to happen. When it happens, that cash can be used to bribe people. If you see somebody driving, you might be able to say, hey, give me a ride and I'll give you $100. They might not know how serious things are, and for $100 they might be willing to do it. You can buy things that you might not be able to buy with a credit card because there won't be electricity. You might be able to buy some water if you have cash. ATMs are going to be dead, so you won't be able to get any money out. Banks will not be able to give money out. Possibly. Most of them will certainly shut down after very little time. So keep this in mind, though. The cash is going to be useful until people no longer value it. Eventually, they're going to figure out that money is worthless. In this scenario, it ain't going to take long before they realize that there's no more stores to buy anything from. So money will not be valuable. You're going to go to a barter system where you'll need to barter for things that actually have value at that point in time, such as clean water and food. Eventually, silver has value. Gold has value. I recommend, and I'll cover this in other videos and other meetups, that you buy silver. I personally recommend that you buy silver in coins. American 90% silver coins, pre-1964 quarters are 90% silver. Why? Versus, say, buying a little block of silver? Because people know what a coin is worth. They recognize a silver dollar. They recognize a silver quarter. They know what that's worth. They don't know what that block of silver that you claim is silver, if it's really silver. If you show them a silver coin, they're going to more likely than not know that that actually is silver. Gold, I do not recommend, simply because it's much too expensive for the average person to buy some and stock it away, and it's also too valuable. I mean, a chunk of gold is worth a lot more than a chunk of silver, and if you're trying to buy something from somebody else or barter it with somebody else, and you have a chunk of gold, it's going to be worth a lot more than whatever it is you're trying to get, most likely. Whereas if you have silver coins, you can break that down and say, I'll give you 10 coins of this for that. Other things you can barter, such as cigarettes. People who smoke are going to be in big trouble really quick. Bullets will be barterable. Candy, anything that people will crave, will be barterable. Obviously, medicine, So you need to start thinking in those terms, and we'll talk about that as well in other videos and meetups. Finally, food infrastructure. Food, you need to have enough to survive the initial phase. The reality is that if you can survive and protect your family and yourself, as horrible as this sounds, a lot of people are going to die. As I mentioned in the first video, estimates are that within a year, and I really believe within months, the vast majority of people are simply going to leave the country, walk out towards the south or the north, or randomly think that maybe another part of the country is still okay and walk, and they're going to die. And if you can survive that, you have a bigger chance of surviving later, after the immediate threat of people attacking you is over. You then at that point need to start planning for how you provide food, planting, gardening, all that kind of stuff. And there's a whole nother topic on that that we can cover later. Your immediate food should be low bulk, low weight, as simple as ramen, those little soup packets, those little packets rather than the cups. The cups take a lot more space. You can buy a case of 24 packets of ramen, which is one of those will fill your stomach. You're trying to keep from dying, not ultimate. This isn't the ultimate food where you're getting everything you need. No, I'm talking about simply not dying of lack of food. This will keep you going. All you add is water and you have a meal at least. Cans are too heavy and too bulky, but if you're staying home, you can store canned food because you'll be staying home. If you're planning to bug out, then cans are heavy and you need to keep that in mind. Lastly, I do recommend you buy vitamins because you're not going to be eating well if you're in this situation, so you need to consider that you're going to need vitamins to provide all the things that you're not getting through the food you're eating just to survive. Once you get past all that and you're at a point where you are able to move out and get out and start providing food from outside of your home, eventually hunting and fishing become important, and there's topics on that we can cover later as well. But for hunting, you're going to need a 22 caliber rifle for small animals. Slingshots also can be used to hunt animals, small animals, rabbits. Squirrels are edible, obviously. If you never thought of it before, believe it or not, squirrels are edible. And it won't take long before you start considering anything to eat. Water is bulky and heavy. You cannot store enough water in home to survive long term. As I mentioned, the water system is going to go down. The water supply is going to go down. So how are you going to get your water? If you live in an apartment complex or you have a pool, there's water available in that pool that you can have. But of course, in order to drink it, you need to filter it and purify it. Rather than carry jugs and jugs and jugs of water around, you need to think differently. If you have a stream near you or a river near you or any body of water like a pond near you, that is water that you can survive on if you can purify it and clean it. Rather than carry the water around, you can filter it. And one of the items I provide a link to is one of many types that are out there, the Sawyer system. It's a water filtration system. This little tube will allow you to stick one end into any water and filter it. It removes 99.99%, 6 nines here, of all the bacteria such as Salmonella, cholera, and E. coli, all protozoa, and so forth. It filters up to 100,000 gallons of water. This one tube will filter that much. So one tube here costs you $20. Think about this. One tube, $20, and you have 100,000 gallons of water available to drink. Now, this doesn't get rid of other things that you need to worry about, but we can get into the other things you need to do to purify your water from viruses and such. There's one other gadget you can buy that is also relatively inexpensive, and you put it into your bottled water after you purify it. You put this gadget in and run it, and it kills the other items or the other bacteria and things that you need to kill. So those two items together gets you the water you need. Now you can drink the water in your pool or in your pond or in the stream that's nearby you. And there's your water. That covers everything that we need to do now to prepare for the event. There's a lot of information in there, and I'm only skimming the surface of most of these topics. So really, that's why you need to have a meetup for each one of these topics where you can burrow down and get into the details. I've gathered a ton of information about every one of these subjects with links to websites and Amazon and everywhere where you can buy basically everything you need. I have a spreadsheet I call my survival spreadsheet that has about, I don't know, 20 tabs on it, breaking every category down and links and prices and everything that you can use to prepare for yourself, and that I will share with everyone in other meetups and videos. The next video is a plan for action for the day of and links to resources. So we'll see you there.